It goes without saying that Martin Luther King's most influential speech was, "I have a dream." But the fact that we know it as that today is a bit of a fluke, for that was not going to be its original name. And the reason being, "I have a dream" was not even in the original script. King had already been giving plenty of speeches within the United States prior to the march, and in doing so, he would repeat a number of similar points within different speeches, and in the process developed a few cliches for himself. "I have a dream" being one of them, having said it rather frequently in then recent speeches, something which exhausted some of his staff at times. It would be in the lead up to the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom that King and his team would work on a speech which they hoped would appeal to as wide of an audience as possible. This would be the first time many Americans, and notably white Americans, would get the chance to hear a full speech from King. Working a few days on it, and almost the entire night the day before and of the march, it would be around 4 a.m. when they called the draft good, and intentionally left out the "I have a dream" part. Being the last speaker in a long lineup of people, often going over their allotted speaking or singing time, during a hot day at that, the energy was starting to get quite low. But one point that King seems to have really tried to hit home with was a large section over cashing a check, which went as follows.
In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
As King was going through the rest of his speech, he noticed that he wasn't quite getting the reaction he hoped for. The crowd seemed to be quiet, maybe tired. The then leader of the student wing of the movement would remark, "It was not nearly as powerful as many I had heard him make." As he moved towards his final words, it seemed that he too could sense that he was falling short. He hadn't locked into that power he so often found. Mahalia Jackson, famed singer who performed third to last, and close friend to King who would try to make it to his speeches, would yell out, "Tell him about the dream, Martin," from behind as he was getting to the end of his speech. It would be shortly after this moment, King pushed aside his papers and went off script to give a sermon from the heart. And with all the energy of a passionate Baptist minister, King would talk about his dream. And with it, he and the crowd would play off each other as if competing to win over the other. King would reposition himself for this off-script moment and started with,
"I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
In a way, it more simply echoes the major point over the checks he was trying to make earlier in the speech. And through repetition, he would weave together multiple heartfelt points with this single thread. I have a dream. And with it, making it draw attention to not only itself, but also what it was trying to address each time it was used. Out of what would become a 6-page speech, the first mention of the dream is at the bottom of the 4th. saying "I have a dream" 7 times. It was not the most said phrase in this section. "Let freedom ring" would be said 8 times. But it would be this dream, quickly putting together notable points from past talks in the literal heat of the moment, that would leave its biggest impact. Even while some of his staff there were like, "Oh boy, here we go," JFK was sitting in the White House, being quoted as saying, "He is damn good," to nearby aides. In the end, it was not King who would name the speech. As journalists covered it, it would be the ones that focused on King's words that plucked it out from the rest. Some of King's staff heard much of the same stuff over and over, to a point that when King's own attorney, Clarence B. Jones, got back to his office a few days later, while filing copyright paper for this speech, he was originally going to title it simply "Speech of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. to the March on Washington." It would only be once Jones's law partner, David LaBelle, caught him and said that that is a horrible name, and that newspapers and TV news reporters were calling it the "I Have a Dream" speech, and he should use that too. It was in that moment that Jones caught on to the impact that part was having, and did end up using that name. King's speech did not go as planned, and in the process of breaking with the script, he would end up breaking from the pack. King would go on to win the 1964 Nobel Peace Prize for his speech, "I Have a Dream," and there's a chance that all of this could have had a different outcome. The speech may have just ended up being a footnote in history, officially known as the "Speech of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. to the March on Washington." Whew. We know that speech as "I Have a Dream," because without the dream, without that moment, it might have not been given a truly fitting and poetic name at all. And that is the end of the video. My question for all of you is, what are your thoughts on the speech? And with all that said and done, my name's Dale, this is Think Fact, and remember, never stop learning. Thanks for watching. He is damn good, damn good.